Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Good morning and welcome to lecture 7 of the lecture series Introduction to Interaction Design. So, in the last lecture we had seen how we look at the conceptual design space and what types of interactions are available that make the user experience very positive. So, today we will be looking at the role of cognition in interaction design, and we have seen that how technology over the past few decades has really been enhanced, and we are all coping up with technology, as well as how the designers cope up with making the user get a better hold of the latest technology and how the interactions can be improved. So, if we take an example, that if you are preparing for an exam, upcoming exam, and while reading for it, our phone will buzz, we will get some message, we will get little distracted, we will check our Instagram or other such platforms. So, that tells us that how nowadays there are so many distractions available and how we all are multitasking in our lives. So, one advantage of technology is how it has made things easier. On the other hand, how we are now constantly multitasking, and there is a lot of research that is going on in this area, that whether multitasking is fruitful or it is detrimental to our mental processes. So, at the same time, it has become very difficult for people to switch their attention and focus on the present task, and whether this improves our efficiency, or is multitasking making us slow down, or our output is decreasing. So, we also see this in other type of digital behaviors like decision making, searching for something, or designing. So, today we will see that how this cognition is looked at by designers to improve the interactions. So, if we see this slide, we can see here how color gives us a clue. So, this is almost like a universally accepted norm where certain colors stand for certain emotions, and we can see that there are a number of these logos of different services that we interact with on a daily basis, like Yahoo, Firefox, and we can see how different colors get across the feeling of optimism, friendliness, or creativity, and how these companies or businesses are using these colors to get across to the user, to communicate with them. And we also retain this in our memory, and we associate certain colors with certain businesses or certain applications, for example. On the right, we can see that how this exercise is going on, that which color will probably go better. So, mood boards and all are also created to identify that what all colors will go well with our theme that we are looking at. So, just like when we are speaking or we are reading something, there is a sentence that we can make sense out of, and that sentence is made of words which are made up of letters, and there is a syntax, there is an organization in which the words are put together so that they make sense. Similarly, in design also, there are these fundamental building blocks which create that meaning in the work that we see in front of us, whether it is a piece of artwork or it is digital media. And so, this is just a quick glimpse of all those building blocks. So, first is the space in which we are working, then we have dot, line, shape, size, color. So, all these attributes determine how the user is going to perceive the work that is being presented in that space, and how minor modifications can enhance it. In one of the last lectures, we saw the grid, how the grid helps in organizing the information much more efficiently. So, cognition is of many different types because we think, we have to remember, we are learning, we are also daydreaming. So, our cognition is involved in a lot of activities throughout the day without us even realizing sometimes. But broadly, if we see, cognition can be divided into experiential cognition and also into reflective cognition. So, experiential cognition is when we are experiencing something. So, for example, when we are say driving a car, so we are observing what is in front of us. If suddenly a dog comes in our way, so we will quickly press the brakes. So our actions are dependent on what we are experiencing at that moment. If there is a green light, we will start driving. If there is a red light, we will stop. Similarly, when we are searching through social media, maybe we will respond to something, we will like some photograph, we will write a comment. So, this but requires a certain level of expertise and engagement. So, we have to be engaged in that process in order to for us to take a particular step in that direction. The next is the reflective cognition. This is where this is a longer process where some attention is required. We need to make a judgment and take a decision on this. So, for example, when we are writing a review or a feedback, so if our experience has been positive, we will search for words that will express our feeling, and similarly when it is a negative experience, we will also search for the right content to get our message across. And also when we are comparing the products, we are looking at all the different factors, memory, speed, a lot of things that will determine our experience, and based on that we will take a decision. So, this can also be seen as the experiential and reflective as fast and slow thinking. So, experiential is a fast thinking wherein we have to take a quick decision, and our reflective is a slow thinking where we are taking more time to reflect back, maybe retrieve some information from somewhere, like when we are writing an exam, we put our thoughts together, we retrieve some information and then we write a nice answer. So, a very simple example of fast thinking or experiential thinking is when I say 2 into 2. So, the quick answer will be 4, it is a very quick process, and the slow thinking or the reflective one is if I say 2 into 5, 68. So, it will take us a little bit more time to come up with the answer. Now, cognition like I said is quite a vast area of study, but some of the important processes are attention, perception, memory, learning, reading, speaking, listening and problem solving. So, we will take a look at all of these processes. So, attention is central to our life. So, we have to be attentive in case we are crossing a road or a lecture is going on. So, we need to be attentive in order to take that information, and in the first example not getting hit by a car, in the second example preparing for the exam, being attentive in the lecture. So, attention is a very basic requirement that is there, and we all pay attention in our lives on a lot of things on a daily basis. So, if we see this particular slide, now attention also means in terms of interaction design, that how quickly can a user pay attention to a certain task or solve a particular problem or give an answer. So, here for example, if I ask you that how many runs did Yuvraj make. So, this will take a lot of time to first identify the information present and then sifting through it to finally get to where the R is showing here. But if I show you this particular organization, then we can quickly identify the R here. So, this shows that how the organization of the elements, like I said earlier, the syntax, how we are organizing this information for the user to be able to quickly get information and be attentive at the same time. So, in order for designers to create more interfaces where the user can be more attentive, so there are certain quick guidelines. So, using color, like we saw here in the previous slide, that how here the rows are slightly different color, that the main heading is of a different color. So, it helps us identify the important elements right there. Underlining, so underlining also is another technique. Then how the sequence of information is presented, what is more important. So, is there some hierarchy, and spacing of items. So, here in this previous example on the left, we saw how even the spacing is uneven, the rows, the columns are up and down. So, that also makes it difficult to perceive the information and pay attention on the given task. And what is to be avoided is at the same time that we should not clutter the visual interface. Even adding too much of color or underlining too much will actually take away from our intention, which is for the user to pay more attention. So, even the to-do list needs to be carefully executed in order to get the desired result that we are looking for. Now, next is perception. So, perception refers to how information is acquired from the environment. So, we have 5 senses: touch, vision, hearing, smell, etc. And these are transformed into our experiences. So, we are constantly learning from our surroundings since when we were a baby, and parents were the first people to interact with us. So, we learned how to respond to our environment, ask for certain things. And perception, again a subhead of cognition, again it is quite a complex area of study, and there are 2 broad approaches: the bottom up processing, wherein we feel first, we process the sensory information first, and the top down, wherein we apply the knowledge that we already have and then interpret it and organize it. So, here is an example of text that is in front of us. We can see 9, it is already divided. So, there is certain spacing, some white space is given, which is again a technique used by designers in order to ensure that the perception is done in the right way. And in the next slide, we can see that all we have done is put a box around these text boxes, and here the background of certain squares or rectangles is in a contrasting color. So, a lot of research has gone into this to find out that which is the most appropriate way of presenting information, and it turns out that when we place information in boxes, that is the most efficient way for one to absorb the information or to perceive the information, to understand the information. Now, all these color, making columns, space, they may seem like a very information that we already know. So, we may feel that this is something that it's already there, but there are a lot of designers and lot of such interactions you will see, all these applications where still these principles are not followed, and a lot of research has gone in the past to be able to come up with this information. So, it is not something that was already always known, but constantly research is going on in this direction to find out better ways to present the information, so that the user's cognitive processes are not overloaded. Now, how can we utilize this? So, by using icons and other graphical representations which is different, not using the same thing for several things. For example, you see that I have put this little orange circle with a tick. So, whenever there is a little guideline or to-do list, so one can easily identify, if I put this circle in every slide, then it will lose its impact, it will lose its meaning. So, similarly, where to use, how much to use, the judicious use of these is important. How do we group information and use separators, boxes or white spaces, color contrast, how many colors, how many colors to use, which color should be next to which color. So these are all, areas of study which researchers are working on, because there are some colors which will not be perceived very well by the eye, but there are some combinations which will, really show the information very clearly. So this comes from trial and error also. There are certain these color combinations already also. So depending on the designer, they can either pick from the existing color palettes or they can create their own color palettes. Also, when we are talking about interactive systems, it's not just about reading, although that comes very easily for us, or the visual elements that are presented to us, because that is one of our strongest senses. But when we are talking about interactive products, maybe applications or other devices also, so there is a feedback given by the audio sound as well. So whenever we are, for example, putting in our pen drive in our computer, so it makes a little sound, so it tells it is connected with the system, right? So how do we also distinguish those sounds? On our phone, sometimes we save our parents' number with a certain sound, our friends' number with a certain sound, so we know whether it's an important call or is it not an important call. So how can we design these sound palette also, so that the user can distinguish? And similarly, the haptic feedback. So when we are typing, we get a little feedback, so we know that we have typed, right? So of course, we can control the haptic feedback also. It can be very mild or medium or high depending on our requirements. So but in all of these, it is important that the designer should be able to help the user distinguish between all of these information. Now coming to memory, so memory is important because we have to store a lot of information and we have to retrieve the information as well in time. But it is not possible for us to remember everything that we see, hear or we smell. So when that happens is when our brain gets overloaded, because there is only a limit till which the brain can store information. Beyond that, it gets just burnt up. So generally the brain uses a filtering process. So it decides whether what information will get further processed and memorized, and but this process is pretty complex. It's not very straightforward, and that proves to say, because sometimes when we want to remember something, we're not able to remember it, but sometimes something will get stuck in our brain and we'll not be able to get rid of it. So that is how the brain is very complex, and as a designer we need to ensure that the interaction that we are creating for the designer, he should be able to memorize it easily, or he or she should be able to efficiently navigate through it. So there are broadly three types of memories. Sensory memory, so this is usually visual or auditory stimulus, and this happens very quickly just after hearing something or seeing something. So that is the immediate sensory memory. Second is the short term memory. So this stores the information temporarily, and then like for example doing simple math calculations or remembering somebody's phone number. And long term memory is when we store the information over a long period of time and over maybe years as well, but we can sometimes surprise ourselves by recalling it when we probably haven't been able, haven't been in touch with it for a while. For example, the periodic table. So what is the how do we represent silver or gold? So we don't use it on a daily basis, but still we can recall it. So that has been embedded in our long term memory. Now there is a need for this personal information management, because there are so many documents that we work on, so many photos we click. Earlier there used to be a phone with the roll, and we used to get it developed, and we used to put them in the album and preserve it. But now with the mobile phones and digital cameras, we keep on clicking all the time all around us, and this becomes like a large clutter. So music files as well, it's so easy to now get our hands on these MP3, MP4 files. So it becomes important that how do we also store and manage this information, maybe by making folders and then folders within that, or on the cloud, saving on the cloud, so we can access them quickly and easily. So this is the personal information management. Then memory load and passwords. So there are a lot of these personal security mechanisms that places like banks, online banking, all of these are employing, because we need to protect our personal data, and then there are several steps through which we can retrieve this in case we forget. So like there is a pin, so several methods are there in order to open up our laptop or our tablet. There is a pin, or to enter a specialized lab we may enter with the help of a card, or maybe the biometric, because we all have a very unique identification, our fingerprint. So or facial recognition for that matter. So all of these different ways are now utilized in order to protect the personal information, and also to allow the access based on their these personal details. So there is this interesting theory by George Miller, where he says that 7 plus or minus 2. So this is the theory where he says that chunks of information can be held in short term memory at any one time, which is 7 plus minus 2. So either 5 or 7 or 9. So this is the range between 5 to 9 we can store in our memory, and this chunk refers to numbers, words, letters. So for example, here on the screen we can see 8, 12, 5, 9. So if I give you some time to memorize, just to look at this, and I close this slide, so maybe one will retain between 5 to 9 numbers. Below that we can see some words: cat, shoe, milk, etc. So again there is the human capacity is limited to recall, once we have seen these words, to recall 7 plus or minus 2 numbers or words. The same goes for the, you can see here, house, cat. Now these are two words which make a phrase, two word phrases. So house, cat, shoestring, chocolate milk. Now they have been put together in such a way that they actually make sense, because we are familiar with chocolate milk, we are familiar with butterfly. So it's easy to remember these two word phrases as well. But when we mix them up, house milk or cat shoe or butter key, so this will take our brain to process much longer, because these are not familiar terminologies. We are seeing them for the first time probably. So we will take a lot more time. So this shows how the user can retain information, and how do we present this information so he can quickly store and retrieve it. So a lot of designers have used this theory to design interactive products or applications. So wherein they have some guidelines, like there should be only 7 options on a menu, or only 7 icons on a menu bar, or 7 bullets, so on and so forth. But this is not really true when we interact with digital interfaces, because for example this is a screenshot of Amazon. Whenever we need to retrieve something, we can just quickly press on the menu bar and all the information will roll out. So we don't, and this is something that will not just be should not appear for a flash and then disappear. So we can always go back to it, revisit it. So really Miller's rule does not really apply for these digital interfaces. Another interesting thing is the digital forgetting, because we all are, like I said earlier, we are all the time multitasking, and we become forgetful over time because there is so much to do. So we use help of to-do lists, reminders in our phones, meeting, submission, deadlines, all of those things. And there are certain diseases also, certain lifestyle oriented, or maybe because of age, which is one of them is Alzheimer's disease, where people forget. So how can we also design interactive systems for people who need to retrieve information, to remember very basic things, just like even remembering their families' faces. So this becomes very important for designers as well. So here we can see that long complicated procedures should be avoided, so that user can quickly understand, memorize it and use it when required. And then interfaces that help recognition, that is better than when they have to recall the information. And also, when we provide variety of ways of labeling the digital information, like email, file, images and all, so it helps the users identify the information easily. Color coding, time stamping and other things are also very effective ways of doing it. Now learning is very close to memory, because without memory we cannot learn, we cannot and we cannot learn without our memory. So it goes hand in hand, because we need memory to hold the information that we are learning, right? So there are two types of learnings, the incidental learning and the intentional learning. So in incidental learning, it happens without any measure being taken from our side. So we can see a map and we can say, oh, that is my street. So we have not really learnt to remember our street, but we have learnt it because we have been walking around that street for a number of years, so we can easily identify it. And intentional learning is where we have to intentionally learn. So for an exam we have to prepare. So these are the two broad learning types. And now since we have online learning, we have so much of multimedia, virtual reality, so we need to navigate through all of these to see that how can this learning be more effective for the user, how can they learn, whether the incidental learning is going to be applicable here or intentional learning. So as designers we need to see that interfaces that we design, they encourage the user to explore, so that maybe incidental learning probably will happen. And interfaces that constrain and guide user to select appropriate actions, so that step by step processes which sort of guide the user, so he or she is not lost in the beginning, and then the learning happens in a very systematic order. Next we come to reading, speaking and listening. So these are three ways in which we take in information. So there are some differences between these three, like written language is permanent, and on the other hand listening is temporary unless we record it. So it's very important in today's time when we are on so many social media platforms and people are writing, responding. So it becomes very important, because the written text is very difficult to take back as compared to when we speak something, we say something. So if for example I am talking with somebody and they make a mistake, they give me a wrong day or time, I can say ki that's a wrong day and time, it's not Tuesday on 7th. But when I receive this information, for example on an email, then I cannot respond in the same manner, I will have to politely probably point out. Okay, so and then also out of these three, which requires the most cognitive load? So for example listening takes less cognitive load, we can easily listen, and that is why young children, they like to listen to stories, because they can just listen and understand rather than reading or looking at something. So we can take from here for interactive interfaces, that when we are giving a feedback through the speech, because again these products can have various ways of passing on the information. So short speech based menus and instructions, so that user is able to understand them. Clear audio speech, because nowadays we have a lot of these bots which respond. So and a lot of accents, people have different accents, they may have some trouble understanding. So the clear audio should be there, and how the text should one should be able to make it large or small depending on their needs. Now, problem solving, planning, reasoning and decision making are processes that involve reflective cognition. So, they often involve conscious processes, that is being aware of what one is thinking about, and discussion with others or talking to ourselves, and the use of various kinds of artifacts like we use books, maps, paper, etc. So, in problem solving, how we approach a problem, if there is a problem of say going on a vacation, then how do we plan for it? We identify the place, how will we reach there, what will we do there. So, if or some other problem, maybe a smaller daily life problem. Planning is the process of developing a course of action, how to book an Uber. So, where do I go first? I will drop a friend, then I will pick somebody else. How do I plan my route around it? Then reasoning involves working through different scenarios and deciding which is the best option or solution to a given problem. So, when we are deciding on what food to order, so people may weigh the pros and cons of different cuisines, Chinese or Lebanese, etc., based on factors like how healthy is it, how many calories, or should I order veg, non-veg, distance, will the food get soggy, and so on and so forth. So, when we are weighing all these options, so they reason through the advantages and disadvantages of each before deciding on the final order. Now, decision making is an area of deep interest for researchers, and we need to know that how people make decisions when they are confronted with information overload. Okay. And so, for example, when we are shopping on the web or in a store, so there are so many products available, how do we make the right decision, how do we arrive at the final product to buy. So, how easy or difficult is it to make a decision when we are confronted with all of these overwhelming choices. So, now the question here is that whether people weigh the costs and benefit of different courses of action, or they use simple heuristics when making these decisions. So, that is a question, and so some studies point out to the fact that we use simple reasoning abilities for making the shortest route or quick decisions to arrive at the final decision, because the human brains have evolved in that way, so that we can quickly make a good enough decision that is not probably the best, but it is good enough for us. So, for example, in the supermarket, when we plan and we go to a market to buy say a pack of noodles, then we will probably buy it based on the brand that we know, or maybe we will see the price, we will compare the price and buy the cheaper one, or we will look at the attractive packaging, that this color combination looks very nice, let us try it out today. So, humans take generally a very simpler route to arrive at the decision. So, from this we can take away that how can we apply this to our interaction design for applications, that so for any for easy access for people who want to understand more about maybe a certain task, how to carry it out for efficiently. So, maybe help pages can be there, or information can be laid out in an organized manner for them, especially for activities like when we are searching the web, we often have a help button. So, if we have a query, it sorts it out, and also the functions should be simple and memorable, so that quick decision making can be done. So, for example, when we are shopping online, so add to the basket, sometimes we see two options, add to the basket or buy right now, so that one can, if one is in a hurry, then adding in the basket, going to the basket, checking out, that process shortens and we just press buy now and just go to the checkout section of it. So, today we saw that how the brain is such a complex feature, and but at the same time it is so important because we require it for making very small to large decisions, learning, memorizing things, retrieving information, and this becomes very important for designers to understand how the cognition works, what types of different cognitions are there for us to be able to design our interaction in such a way that the cognitive load is decreased, because anyway, because of all these technologies and new things that are coming around every day, we need to sort of organize our life in a certain manner. And so applications that do that, applications that will help us simplify our lives will always be preferred by users. On the other hand, applications that will create more confusion, so they will of course fail over some time. So we'll stop here today, and in the next lecture we will start with social interaction, that what is the role of social interaction in designing interactive interfaces for users. Thank you.